Well, welcome to the ongoing educational series webcast. Today we have a very appropriate topic to discuss with everyone, which is the college financial aid and merit aid process. And we said regardless of income, because many of us may think, well, I don't want to bother going through that FAFSA form or the profile, all the other paperwork. There's a lot of myths, I think, with this process. So I wanted to, have tonight be kind of a lot of education. We've got two real professional ladies that have been doing this decades. Shelley Honeycutt and Kathleen Dion were founders of New England College Advisors, or College Advisors of New England. They will tonight, give a good overview of kind of the beginning process, going through a lot of the accounting, shall we say. So we have Shelley and Kathleen. So with that, take it away, ladies.
Thank you, David. Welcome, everyone. My name is Shelley Honeycutt. During our presentation, we will be reviewing why you should be filing your financial aid regardless of income. We will take a look at the new FAFSA, common over-reporting errors and common investment questions that families have. Although the CSS profile is only required at 500 private colleges nationwide, it's an important part of securing merit aid. So we'll take a look at it a little more closely and show you some of the common roadblocks that it might present for you. We'll also take a brief look at what to expect with award letters along with the time frame. Finally, we will review our method for appealing to gain additional merit aid. At the close of the presentation, we will also provide you with many resources to support your family in the process, such as a live walkthrough of the new FAFSA, a live walkthrough of the CSS profile, a PDF to download of the FAFSA, and we'll talk about why that's important, and copies of our presentation, and we will even provide you with a sample of a merit aid appeal. So let's get started. And these are the financial aid forms that you will need to get used to. So it's important to know the names, titles, what they might mean for you and your family. To meet deadlines and maximize merit aid, you need to know the types of forms each college might request. The FAFSA form, or free application for federal student aid, is required by all colleges nationwide. And the CSS profile, which is put out by the College Board, and we'll talk about how to access that in a few more slides, is required by only 500 private colleges nationwide. But if your college requires it, it is important to file that. And in a timely manner, we'll talk about deadlines. As well as institutional forms, some colleges, in addition to the FAFSA and the profile, might require institutional forms. So if they do, they'll be notifying mom and dad by email or the student and their student portal. Sometimes they only request these forms if you get verified, and that's just basically a financial aid audit. 10% of files at every college do get verified, and you'd have to fill out these forms for the college. And why file financial aid? Well, there's many reasons as to why you should be filing regardless of income, but merit aid is the number one reason. So since 2007, there's been a new regulation. Colleges do not have to give you your acceptances, financial aid award letters, or notifications of scholarship money if you do not file. So that would be the number one reason you would not obtain a financial aid award letter. And on those financial aid award letters, they do have partial need-based aid on there as well. And we'll talk about why that is important for middle-income families. And we'd like to enlighten you or encourage you that the right college list can also yield additional merit aid. So private colleges have different policies, and some have merit aid policies that give tremendously more than other colleges that might have just a need-based policy or public colleges. So the right college list could yield more scholarship money in the end Examples of that would be University of Vermont, UNH, and also some public colleges do give merit aid. And we're not just talking about typical merit aid, 2,000, 3,000. I'm talking about merit aid that would be anywhere from 15,000 to 25,000. So examples of these schools would be University of Vermont, University of New Hampshire, University of Tennessee. BU would be a good example of a private college that gives merit aid regardless of income. Just if the student meets the qualifications, they're accepted and they file by a particular date. So in this instance with Boston University, if your student files by December 1st and they meet the criteria of the presidential scholarship, there's no additional application needed, and they will achieve an additional $20,000 per academic year. So it's important to be filing. And we'll also talk about why certain application statuses like early action, early decision, or submitting early could really give you and your family an advantage. But first, we need to learn more about the FAFSA, the free application for federal student aid. It does open every year, October 1st. So you should be aware of that. That does not mean that's the deadline. Many times we get questions about, is that the deadline? No, it's the date that it opens. And therefore, you should start preparing for it prior to that, but that's not the deadline. Deadlines can vary based on the application status that your student chooses, such as here you can see early decision or early action. So in order to know exactly when those deadlines are, simply Google the name of the college and financial aid deadlines, and those will pop up. Those will be the most current deadlines that you see on the college's financial aid webpage. The other way that you can see it is sometimes in the college application, they may list it, right? So it opens October 1st. Many times we might get notifications from guidance offices and they'll make it feel like that's the deadline. It is not, right? So the first thing we're going to encourage you to do is obtain your FSA IDs and passwords in order to access the FAFSA. And you would want to get one for the student that you're filing for and one for the parent. You should verify each of these IDs. You should verify them via email as well as cell phone, because otherwise you will not be able to get in. They will bump this information up against Social Security. So be very conscious when you're applying for these FSA IDs and passwords that you're putting in the right date of birth and the exact Social Security number. That can cause some issues for you with the Department of Ed. If you have to go correct that, that sometimes can take like 6 weeks. So definitely verify the FSA IDs and passwords. And really, I would tell you that's one of the hardest things about getting the FAFSA done. This is where you'll be going. So there's a new way to access the FAFSA and there's a new look and feel. So we thought it was important to show you what it looks like, especially if you're a parent that has already filed a FAFSA and you've gone to fafsa.ed.gov. That's no longer a website. When you type that in, it will not come up. It won't even come up, or it suggests that you go to studentaid.gov. So we wanted you to be able to see what this looks like and understand where you'll access the FAFSA, because it's a little bit of a deep dive within the website now. So once you go there, you'll then click up at the top margin and hit apply for aid. And then the drop-down box, you'll see complete the FAFSA form. You're still not there yet. So you'll be presented with options here. You'll be presented with start here or log in. It all takes you to the same place. And many parents we find get confused with this. So just select one or the other. I typically select login. And then you'll once again be presented with choices. So we are going to encourage you to select I am the student and want to access FAFSA. It is a new FAFSA and it's a little glitchy. So we have found that there's less glitches when you log in from the student side. And you'll use the student's FSA ID and password as you log in there. Next, we would say gather all of the documents. This is going to make everything easier for you. And for this year, so for seniors in high school who are applying for financial aid for fall 2022, you will be using your taxes for 2020. So gather your 1040 federal taxes. Sometimes I see parents gather the state taxes, and that can be a little more difficult. And the instructions do not refer to the right boxes. So I would say get your federal taxes, 1040s, your 2020, as well as your W-2s, and collect your investment balances, right? So what investments get reported on the FAFSA? This is a big question for parents. They're always concerned about what will I be reporting? And I would start out with non-retirement funds. So this is a big difference between the FAFSA, and later we'll talk about the CSS profile. Non-retirement funds, so your stocks, bonds, money markets, brokerage accounts, those types of funds that are not in a retirement fund, such as a 401k, 403b, an IRA, and a Roth, or a traditional IRA. And next, you'll need to figure out how much cash on hand, savings, and checking that you have. So what are the balances? And then real estate outside of the family home. So we do not, on the FAFSA, look at the value of the family home. That is suppressed. You do not report that. But if you have real estate, such as rental property or something of that nature, yes, you will be reporting that. You'll be reporting the value, so what you could sell it for today, minus any debt owed on it, as well as 529s under the parent's name. So if mom and dad have a 529 for Johnny that they are filing the FAFSA for, they will report that student's 529 under the parent's investment. Even though it's designated for Johnny, if mom and dad or dad are the custodians of that 529, then they should report that. They should not be reporting sibling 529s there. Just report the 529 current balance for the student that you are completing the FAFSA for, as well as business value, only if it's not a family business and you have over 100 full-time employees. That is the only time you will be reporting business value on a FAFSA. Now, once again, we're going to tell you a little bit about why you'll be filing the FAFSA and what this will do for you. So when you file the free application for federal student aid, regardless of income, it does give your family access to federal direct loans for your student. So for a senior that will be entering their freshman year of college and is dependent, and that's most students that are living home with mom and dad and are under 24, not married, and do not have children, that would give them access to $5,500 in the form of a direct federal Stafford loan. A portion may be subsidized or unsubsidized. That will be detailed on your financial aid award letters. But that student can take that loan out in their name without a credit check and without mom or dad co-signing. In addition, you would have access to the direct federal Parent Plus loan for the parent or guardian to pay up to cost of attendance. A lot of times we have questions about what cost of attendance will include in it. So it'll include tuition, fees, books, room and board, traveling expenses, and more, including even a one-time laptop, healthcare for that academic year if your student is not covered.
Shelley, we have a question that might benefit the group.
Okay.
Are UTMA accounts also recorded as assets along with 529s?
Yes, they are. UTMA accounts, however, would be put into the investment box under the student.
Great. And we had another question. Someone feels like maybe they need to make some corrections on the FAFSA. Is that possible once you've submitted it?
Good question. And UTMA and UTMG would be dealt the same way. So let me just go back to that. And yes, you can make corrections. And that's a great question. So you can go in and there's a box that you can click and say make corrections. And it does get recorded what your corrections are, so I would tell you that, and then it would be resent out to the colleges on the list. And also sometimes when you look into the correction history, you may see that your school went in there and made a correction, and that does happen from time to time. So they saw maybe an error and they went in there and did that. Also, when you do file the FAFSA, there's a four-digit code on your FAFSA when you print out the confirmation page. And if schools or colleges want to make the correction, then you can give them that code and they can go in and make it. And I would encourage you that a professional at a financial aid office would be perfectly fine at making the correction. I wouldn't be worried about that. So the FAFSA should take about 30 minutes to complete. And even for a novice, you can download the PDF. We will be providing it. It's really nice to go through the PDF. It also comes along with quite extensive directions, but it will refer right to the boxes on your 1040 federal taxes. And then in addition, it will refer to some boxes on your W-2s, where we'll talk a little tonight about those common reporting errors that you might encounter. But it's nice to have that PDF in front of you and look at it beforehand. You'll use the student FSA ID and password to log into the FAFSA, and then you'll use one of the parents' FSA IDs and passwords to import the IRS tax transcript in. So this is important and it's very helpful because most of the data that you normally would have to input will be imported from the IRS right into the FAFSA. And the reason why this is a great idea to do instead of inputting the numbers yourself, number one, errors, number two, verification. So colleges must verify, and I do that in quotes because verify 10% of the parents that apply for financial aid per the Department of Ed regulations. And they typically will do that with parents that did not import their taxes or could not. There are sometimes some reasons why you cannot import the taxes. Many times that would be if you had identity fraud and the IRS gave you a PIN ID, or if you owe taxes. And even if you've cut the check, sometimes there's a lag time about 6 weeks before you can import your taxes into a FAFSA. In that case, I would encourage you to have your tax professional pull a tax transcript for you and submit it to the school. And that might help you avoid the verification. So use the student's ID to import their taxes in from the IRS as well. So if they didn't file, that's okay. Students aren't required to file unless they make over a certain amount, about $5,200, and your tax professional is probably making that decision. That doesn't mean they didn't get a W-2, however. So there's a box that you'll check, not required to file, but they will still ask about income if they've earned it. So you need the W-2s in front of you for parents and for students. And the W-2 is mostly used for reporting your contributions to your retirement fund that you contributed that year through your employer. And we'll take a closer look at the W-2 because this is where that over-reporting error comes in. And also you should be aware that the FAFSA has skip logic. So not everyone will be presented with the same questions. It may skip certain questions based on how you answered previous questions. So that's pretty helpful.
One more quick question. Is there an app to file the FAFSA, which would give somebody the ability to do it on their phone or possibly their tablet?
You can do it. Yes, absolutely. That's a great point, Kathleen. So the other thing I would tell you is I do hundreds of FAFSAs a year. And I would tell you, I would try, if you have a Mac, I would not log in through Safari. I would use Chrome or some other browser. Safari seems to give you more of the glitches. And this year, it's a new system. It's been pretty glitchy with kicking you out of the system, but no fears, you do not lose the data when that happens. You just log back in. It's just annoying, is what it is. That's all. And so the W-2, here's an example of a W-2. This is a 2021, but you would be looking at a 2020. And you can see here in the circle, boxes 12A through D. You could have a 12S on here, but that's very rare. I put here as an example 12DD, and that's usually where the highest number is if you have numbers in these boxes. And you may not. If you're not contributing to a 401k or a retirement fund at work, then there will be no numbers in here. But with the 12DD, that's usually the largest number unless you're a little on the older side. And that is your contributions or your employer's contributions to your health care for that year. And many times parents get a little confused and they add that into their 401k contributions, and that would be over-reporting income. So just be aware of that. And that's why this is in this presentation, because it's a common error.
Before we move on to the CSS profile, one more question about the FAFSA. For families who are divorced, who should be filing the FAFSA with the student?
Good question. So the questions are now more descriptive on this new FAFSA. However, it should be the parent that the student lives with the most out of the last 12 months. If it's exactly the same, which it typically isn't, then you would move to the parent that provides the most support during the academic year. Also, another thing that comes up with that is many parents will say, well, the student's with me most of the time, but we alternate exemptions, meaning claiming the children. And so all the children are not on my taxes this year. Do I get to claim them as household members? And the answer is yes. It won't matter who's claiming them on which taxes. You get to say who's in the household, and then how many students have you claimed will import in with the IRS tax data. So don't worry about that. So it can be different. The number of exemptions on your taxes can be different than the number in your household. Common misconception. So next would be the CSS profile. And I would tell you first do the FAFSA because it gives you a little bit of experience and you get a little more confident when you get that accomplished, and then move on to the CSS profile. This is put out by the College Board, the same organization that you might register your student for the PSATs on, SATs, or AP exams. You will need your student's username and password for College Board in order to get into the CSS profile. Easiest way to find this website is just Google CSS profile College Board. It'll take you right to this screen, and you can see here that you sign into fall 2022 to spring 2023. And so that's highlighted because that's the academic year that we're going into. And I can't tell you how many parents will click on the other year and fill it all out and have to do it again. So just keep thinking, when will my students start school? Fall 2022? Great. That's the application I'm going to be filling out. Unfortunately, with the CSS profile, if it's required each year, all the data gets zeroed out now. So you have to go re-enter everything again. However, it is worth it. It is how these private colleges determine how they will divvy out their merit aid. They use an institutional methodology, which is distinctively different than the FAFSA methodology, which is a federal methodology, to calculate how they will apply their merit aid. There is a fee to file, and it can add up. So it's a $25 fee and then $11 for every college added thereafter. If you, depending upon how you answer the questions in the CSS profile, you might qualify for a waiver, and so they will not charge you at the end. They don't tell you that, it just happens, so be aware of that. If you are receiving free or reduced lunch, you will automatically qualify for that. If not, and you think you might qualify, go to guidance and ask them if they can give you a waiver. Your guidance counselor at your high school, they might be able to do that. But it's important to understand that they do charge a fee. And once again, it's important to gather the documents prior to sitting down and completing the CSS profile. Many times the CSS profile should be done in a couple of chunks of time because it is a lot. So you will still be using the 2020 1040 taxes and the W-2s for both parent and student. And you should gather your investment balances. And we'll talk about what's different from the CSS profile to the FAFSA. Here you can see we've highlighted in purple the different investments that will be reported on the CSS profile versus the FAFSA. So you do disclose more information here. Retirement funds, current balances. You'll be reporting them for each parent separately. They will ask that question. And on the FAFSA, that's not asked. You're just reporting the contributions that you did for that year. So this, once again, is current balance of retirement funds. And like the FAFSA, you would report cash savings and checking balances. And then you would also report real estate. And this does include the family home. Unlike the FAFSA, the CSS profile will ask you to report the value of your family home. It will ask you for the mortgage payment. It will ask you when you purchased the home. It will ask you the value, what is owed on the home. And then if you have an equity on it, they would want that separately reported. And 529s do get reported. It's under the parent as they calculate it in the institutional methodology. It is calculated under the parent's investment, but it is a separate question, unlike on the FAFSA, as well as business value. And that is any business, regardless of it being a family business or having under 100 employees. The CSS profile wants to know the business value. So that would be what the business is worth minus any debt that it has. So the CSS profile, and we will be giving you a live walkthrough of the CSS profile. And many times it's helpful to put it up on your desktop and you can pause it as you go through. It should take about an hour to complete, and it's okay to do it in a couple of sessions. There is no PDF available. There never has been. So I would encourage you, once you do complete it, you should print it out and place it in a financial aid file for next year, because then you can look back at what you reported. The information will be right there, because remember, I told you it goes away. Each year that you do it, it gets zeroed out. So you can't look back. You use the student's College Board username and password to access this, which is a little odd. You don't create your own account. You will be using the current year, your 2020 taxes, and you will also be estimating 2021. So it's great to have a pay stub in front of you, and you can look at the year to date on the pay stub, and that'll help you estimate 2021. And then they will ask you to project income for 2022 as well. The good news is there is a special circumstances box within the CSS profile at the end, and you can craft a statement in there about why your family might look better on paper than they actually are. And we'll talk about some of those reasons that you might look better on paper than you do, than you actually are doing, and things that colleges care about. So many times parents will say, well, I have a lot of consumer debt, or I have a large mortgage. Colleges don't care about that. But what they do care about are dental expenses, medical expenses that are uncovered. It could be RX expenses, counseling, physical therapy. If you think that you're running about 7% of your adjusted gross income on your taxes, you can just look at your 1040 and you look at line 11 and it'll tell you your adjusted gross income. If these expenses for 2020 or 2021 total more than maybe 7% of that amount or around about that, then you should be reporting this. you should be listing this in the special circumstances box. But be prepared to prove it. So if you have a large RX expenses, or maybe you have students that have gotten braces, these are things we forget that we pay for along the year, but they really add up. You cannot include premiums in there, but you can include deductibles. Be prepared, though, to prove it. If you do have a lot of RX expenses, I find that it's easy. We tell our clients, go to CVS or your pharmacy and ask them to print it out for the last 2 years, and it'll give you the total. Be prepared to provide the college with the documentation. The other things that could be included in there are large legal expenses that could also be coming from a divorce, and also household expenses, large household expenses that you couldn't avoid. Maybe it was a roof and it wasn't covered by the insurance or something of that, large appliances that had to be replaced, or a heater or something of that nature. As well as, this is going to sound odd, but severances. So if you got a one-time severance, it is a one-time income increase, then you should talk about that and let them know that you won't be receiving that in the future. Or income decrease, if you know maybe your hours are getting cut back, or you'll be losing your job, you should be talking about that in the special circumstance box. In addition, CSS Profile will want you to these colleges want you to upload your financial documents, such as your 1040. Sometimes they'll ask separately for Schedule 1s that are in the 1040, Schedule 2, Schedule 3, or if you own your own business, it might be a Schedule C, as well as W-2s for the student and for the parent. They use an iDoc system for that, but some colleges don't, and they might just contact you by email and say upload it to the college portal, or email it, scan it in and email it to us. Sometimes parents struggle with scanning documents in. I would tell you, just on your phone, Tiny Scanner is excellent, very easy. You can easily scan them in and email them out or text them out. Very handy application. Here we have an example of an award letter, also referred to as a financial aid award letter. There's no standardization of award letters, and the titling of the loans, scholarships, and other aid can vary greatly from college to college. I recently read an article that said they had tracked that colleges have over 100 different titles for the direct federal Stafford loan. So that's not really helpful for parents, I would tell you. Here the college has listed the scholarship, which is merit aid and doesn't need to be repaid. And next you can see the subsidized and unsubsidized direct federal Stafford loan, which would total $5,500. We spoke about that earlier and said if you file your FAFSA, regardless of income, the student will have access to the direct federal Stafford loan. And for a freshman, that total amount should total $5,500, but you might see it detailed out like this as subsidized and unsubsidized. Subsidized simply means there's no interest accruing until 6 months after the student graduates. Right now, under COVID, since March 27th, 2020, there is no interest accruing on any federal loans, and there are no payments due. But that will end on January 31st, 2022, unless there's a new adjustment to that law. Many colleges will list the total aid that you've received, and then some will list the cost of attendance. That's what COA stands for, and we're using that on you because colleges will begin to use these acronyms on you. So that stands for cost of attendance. Sometimes they'll list it on the award letter. Sometimes you're on your own, you have to go hunt it down. So the easiest way to do that is Google the name of the college, cost of attendance 2021. And then you can go look at it itemized. And that's a good thing to do because you want to see, how much is tuition, mandatory fees, room and board. What are some of these miscellaneous items that they're tucking into cost of attendance? And many times it can be medical coverage for the year. So these are things, if you have medical coverage, you wouldn't be paying for, so you can back that out of your personal cost of attendance. And then many colleges will list the net costs. So getting to the net cost or out-of-pocket cost is the important part of this example and of the process that you'll be going through this year if you have a senior, or next year if you have a junior. You need to do this with each award letter because you won't be able to compare these offers and these award letters and determine what is a deal and what may not be a deal, right? So college debt is an issue in our country with over 44 million borrowers. We want to make sure that we're assessing our opportunities and comparing apples to apples. So here you can see we would encourage you now to increase that award letter, right? So we're talking about merit aid appeal. Needless to say, you will need to lower the net cost regardless of family income. It's important to do that. And many times your students, if you have seniors right now, they'll be receiving some of their awards or scholarship notifications by December 15th. But we're going to encourage you to go back to the school, say thank you, but ask for more. Even if your student can acquire 3,000 more, typically you retain that over each year. And that's an additional $12,000 that you don't need to come up with. So it's an important thing to do. At the close of the presentation, we'll be giving you an example or a sample of a merit aid appeal. And we hope that you do use it and modify it to meet your students' needs. This email should come from the student. They should email their admissions counselor. Once they've received the acceptance and maybe the scholarship, they should pause for about 4 to 6 days and then respond with, "Thank you so much. I do really appreciate this. Here are some of the new accomplishments I've done since submitting my application. And oh, by the way, I was hoping to acquire more merit aid." And this works out pretty well for our families and for students. So sometimes they will push back on that. Admissions will redirect the student to do a need-based appeal. That's something you can do later if your family qualifies. But on the example email we give you, we tell you how to respond to the admissions person if they do that, and nicely say, "Thanks, but we won't qualify for need-based aid. We're hoping to achieve more merit aid." And sometimes if you just leave that alone, in about a week or so, we do see this a couple of times a year. Every time we encourage students to do this, they will find some additional merit aid, 3,000, 5,000. I would encourage each one of you to do that. Think about the new accomplishments that your student has had since submitting the application, list that in there, and see if you can get a little more of the net cost covered for you and your student.
Just one question before we move on. As many families are collecting, some form of unemployment due to the COVID pandemic, how is this affecting award letters? And, maybe how could you use that? I think this speaks a little more to a potential financial appeal.
It does, and it can, right? So anything that you're reporting on your 2020 taxes actually is transferred in now. Any of the reportable unemployment that you've collected over 2020 will be transferred into your FAFSA. And so the school will know about it. And so yes, I would say that many times that merits a financial need appeal because you might have missed out on income. So go back and calculate that. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, well, the payments were higher," right? But it may not even be close to your salary or what you're used to. So recently, last week, I met with a family and we calculated that they were missing 64,000 in income. Right? And then it also changed what they ended up paying to keep healthcare benefits going. So you have to calculate all the cost, and that would be, and you would use an official special circumstance need appeal, which would not go to admissions like I was encouraging you to do with merit appeals. It would go to financial aid. It does trigger a lot of paperwork, but it would be worth it. Why submit your applications early? Tonight is about focusing on gaining more merit aid. And when you submit applications early, you typically get more acceptances if you have a well-rounded application and more merit aid. And that pertains as well. You get more merit aid when you have a well-developed application, meaning great activities and a strong essay and strong supplemental essays. So early decision is typically binding. So many parents struggle with the different types of application statuses. Early decision is binding. The only way out of that is you cannot afford it. Otherwise, you are bound to that, and you have to notify your other colleges that you will not be coming. Early action is not binding, but it can gain more merit aid than any other status, as long as your application is well developed. Not all colleges have an early action, so it's not something that all colleges do. And then there's regular action, right? And then there's rolling. So rolling is a little different. We see that more in the southern states and at certain public colleges. And typically with rolling, you're notified of the decision within 3 weeks of submitting once all of your documents are received, transcripts, application, essay, SAT scores. Right? But early action can yield more merit aid, and we would encourage you, if you have students that are juniors, to investigate submitting early action applications or just submitting early. Like I gave you an example tonight about Boston University. They do not have early action. They have regular action and early decision, which is binding, remember? But if you submit by December 1, you could be eligible for the presidential scholarship, which is $20,000 a year. And that is helpful in pushing down the net out-of-pocket cost, right? So we would encourage you to do that. That does mean it could change your financial aid deadlines. So different application statuses like early decision, early action can change your deadlines. So you can just Google the name of the college, financial aid deadlines, and it will list for you early decision deadlines for FAFSA, CSS profile, and any institutional form that they have, as well as early action and regular action. If you've missed a deadline, don't panic. Just call the financial aid office, let them know. They'll be happy that you notified them and get it done as soon as you can. So there's another thing that your student can do. And sometimes we're disconnected with the student is over here doing the application and mom or dad are over here doing the FAFSA or the CSS profile. But you can broadcast your intentions through applications. So this is something that if you have a student that still hasn't submitted all of their applications yet this year, perfect. Get into their common application with them or their college applications with them and check out the questions that the college is asking. Many colleges will ask, will you apply for need-based aid? And unless your adjusted gross income is below 40,000, then you should be saying no, because you will not qualify for a Pell Grant or any federal need-based aid really if you're above 40,000 a year. So you can answer no. The student can answer no to that. And that also helps indicate to the school in admissions that you will not be filing this. This doesn't mean that they won't ask for those forms. Even if the student has checked that off, they might get a notification saying, we haven't received your FAFSA or your CSS profile, and we won't be sending out acceptance until we do. Okay, so be aware of that. But it's a way to broadcast your intentions that you're just looking for merit aid. And in the Common App, you might also have opportunities. Some of the schools list their higher priced scholarships. So most scholarships, you do not have to put in an additional application. But at some schools, they do have opportunities to look at their special scholarships or their higher end scholarships, and they'll be telling you about the deadlines and how to submit those applications. It does typically mean more essays, and students don't like that, especially at this time of the year, but I would encourage you to do that if your student fits the criteria. Those are other spots you can find more merit aid, and that merit aid will stay for the continued years as long as they're meeting the GPA that's stipulated by that scholarship, as well as the opportunity to apply for honors programs. So with honors programs, you usually get great benefits and additional money. So if your student is well positioned to be participating in an honors program and they fit the criteria of that school, then I might encourage you to have them do that. Yes, it typically comes with additional essays. However, it will come with additional monies and many benefits. Every program differs from college to college, but they might get different dorming room options. They get to register for classes first. They get to take classes with visiting professors. They get all types of benefits. So I would encourage you to consider that if you think that that would fit your student well.
If the person, the student has second thoughts, maybe they decide that they don't want to do the early action, could they go ahead and change their application to regular action or submit another one? How does that work?
They can, right? So admissions is pretty easy on this. You could email your admissions counselor and say, I'd like to take my application and move it to regular action, right? So a reason to do that might be, hey, I don't like the essay that I did. I want another chance at submitting the essay. They don't have to let you resubmit a new essay, but they typically will. So yes, you could do that. Early decision, that's going to be hard. However, if you contact admissions and you say, I submitted early decision, but I don't feel very dedicated to that, here's why. Really, I would blame it on cost. We are worried as a family about cost, or we've had new financial concerns that make us worry about that. We'd like to withdraw and go early action or regular decision. They typically will let you. So your next steps would be complete the FAFSA, complete the CSS profile, wait for acceptances, wait for award letters, ask for more merit aid, and attend future info sessions.
Excellent. Thank you so much. I think that wraps up all the questions. I'm not seeing any others come into the chat. Thank you everyone for attending, and we hope to see you on future events. So we hope this information helps, and have a great evening.